Small business represents 97% of all the businesses in Canada. At the start of the year, we had 1.15 million small businesses. By June 1st, over 225,000 of those businesses and the jobs they support are gone for good.
How's it going? This is Scott from Internet News, and today we have a special guest, Chris Sky. He started an initiative on Facebook called it was Back to Work initiative, and it got up to 3,000 likes. And from there, he started backtowork.biz, where he is out now supporting local businesses with legal counsel and sort of a network of people who want to get back to work to really feed their families and really to push back against sort of the lockdown measures. So, yeah, pleasure having you, Chris.
Thank you.
We just want to start to kind of see where you're at with everything. I think you've been at it for about 4 or 5 weeks now.
Well, I started the Back to Work Facebook group just as a way to spread awareness at the end of March, early April. Around the same time, we started going to the protests in Toronto. I wasn't an original organizer of the protests, I just went there. And I ended up giving an interview to Rebel News that a bunch of people heard. So they said, you should be speaking. You sound like you know what you're talking about. So I did a public speaking, and I combined that with the Facebook group Back to Work to try to get the message out to people that we need to really help the small businesses, because they're the largest part of our economy. They represent the most jobs in the economy, so they're the most important part of the economy. So if they fail, the economy pretty much fails. From there, after Back to Work Facebook group got quite a bit of following, we have almost 3,000 members in probably about 5-6 weeks, and with me speaking at Queen's Park every Saturday, I decided to come up with a plan to actually help the small businesses. So I created a nonprofit group called Back at Work with the Back to Work initiative, and that's the website you were talking about. It's www.backtowork.bz. So what we're doing for the small businesses is anybody that wanted to open that's not technically allowed to open, or they have to open with crippling restrictions that makes it unviable for their business, they can sign up on the site. It's completely anonymous. Nobody knows except for me. I get an email notification as soon as that person has signed up. I will contact that person. I will ask them for the location of their business. I will ask them to bring their lease. I will meet them on site at their business. The first thing we do is go through their lease agreement. This is very important, and not many people know this, but it applies to at least 1 out of 4 business leases. There's a clause in your lease, most of you, some of you, that says if you have a forced government closure, you are not required to pay rent. This is huge because no landlord's going to tell you this. Every landlord's going to ask people for money, and a lot of people legally do not have to pay rent. That's the first thing we tell them.
So this is like a standard clause that
It's
are
a
in a
standard
lot
clause.
of people's leases.
It's not necessarily standard. It's standard if you had a good lawyer that thought about this kind of stuff. But if you just went with some fly-by-nighter, you never know what's in there. But that's why everybody needs to check their lease for that clause or a similar clause.
What would be like named as, or like?
It literally will say if there's a forced closure, and then it'll give you the details of what you're responsible for if there's a forced closure. And most of them that have that clause will say if there's a forced government closure, you're not responsible for any rent the entirety of that time. So what we get people to do with that is, now they're in the driver's seat. They can either make a deal with their landlord where they're not paying rent, or they can use that as a tool to renegotiate their lease from scratch. An entirely new lease with either deferred payments, lower monthly payments, etc. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is, based on their individual business type, layout, etc., we work together with them on site, and we help them come up with an adaptive business model that will allow them to generate revenue with minimal risk and maximum safety. That way they have less chance of somebody coming there and giving them any hassle, but they can still make the money they need to stay afloat and the money they need to feed their families. And so basically operating de facto unopened but open, under the radar, but following as many of the guidelines as physically possible.
So you help them kind of go through the guidelines and actually like abide by it, but in a way that actually will allow them to make more profits.
Exactly. They need to have a balance of being able to, they need to be able to abide by as many guidelines as physically possible, of course, but they also need to make their business viable. So if you're applying by the guidelines, then it's going to cause you to close your business anyway.
Well, like a lot of restaurants aren't open here, but like people where it's like the limited capacity, but you did your business plan on having X amount of capacity and foot traffic.
Exactly. So. And like I said, it varies varies greatly from business type to business type, and even location, and especially layout and how your entrance works and everything else. But one way or another, we show them how to make money. Now, if somebody calls, gets someone to go there, or they have an unfortunate encounter with a government bylaw officer, we already have a legal place in team, and we have a privately generated legal fund that's available to every business in the network. When a business signs up, we ask them to donate a minimum of $100 to that fund, but we also have private donators donating to the fund. Currently, the fund has almost $10,000 once I put the cash donations in this week.
So this is for really the legal bill. So if someone does come, and I think I've heard you say that even if you get fined, you're fine. They still got to take you to court.
Well, first of all, if somebody called and they showed up there and you're doing what I asked you to do, if the government bylaw officer comes up, your door's not going to be wide open. You're not going to have your sign that says open. You're not going to have your lights on. You'll be closed. You'll probably be taking appointments and what have you. So if they do come there, there's a lot of things you're legally allowed to be doing at your business. You can be
like
cleaning.
Currently right now.
Yes, even if you're not allowed to be open. You can be there cleaning. You can be there getting it ready to open. You can be doing training. You can be doing lots of things there. You can even be having a gathering of people there, as long as you're not over the gathering limit of people, but you're not allowed to be open, and you're not allowed to be offering your services that you normally would. So if a government bylaw officer did come, they're not even allowed to enter the premises. If you want to let them enter and show them that you're not doing anything illegal. If you were following my business model, 9 out of 10 times if they come in there, they'll walk out and they won't bother you. The other 1 out of 10 times, they'll more than likely give you a warning if that happens. So at that point, you're not getting charged with anything, and it's up to you whether you want to decide to stay open or close. For the people that are really unfortunate and they do come in and say, oh, we're going to fine you, we're going to take your business license, it's really not that simple. It has to go to court. This is the same court as traffic tickets. In the GTA, if you get a traffic ticket today, your court date, they won't even tell you when it is because they're backed up for almost a year and a half already. So by the time this would actually get to court would be years down the road. For them to try to take your business license, if you're a chiropractor, for instance, and they came in there and you had a patient and they said, we're going to strip your business license, they have to report you to your college with every reason why they want to strip your business license. The college has to decide, they have to vote whether they even want to try to pursue the stripping of your business license. Then it has to go to court. Same thing with the fine. And if you look anywhere in North America, people that have actually been fined by the government or even arrested in some cases in the United States, every single one of them that has challenged in court has won. Every single one. Not one person that has challenged in court was found guilty and was charged and had to pay the fines or any of that.
So it sounds like you're really bringing the legal battle to this. Like this right now, the emergency order, the Emergency Act doesn't really allow. I mean, our courts are almost closed. Like there's a very thin sort of window that gets into court, and they actually have to go to a pre-court to see if it's actually an emergency to go to court. So we have all these things to our democracy happening right now. So you are really trying to put what I hear is put it back into the legal realm and be like, hey, then take me to court, and then let's actually see if this is a lawful sort of act.
Well, we know it's not lawful, and that's why we want to challenge them, and we want everybody to challenge them, because as soon as one person challenges them and wins, everybody will realize that everything they're doing is illegal. That's why they come up with these arbitrary charges, like I'm going to fine you $500,000. They have to try to scare people into compliance because they know they have no legal authority.
Well, I mean, right now, what I understand is that there is a council. Like, it's not going through Parliament. Parliament's closed. You've been down there protesting, but they're only in there for a short period of time. So
with a minimal amount of people, with secret votes, secret ballots, so you don't know what they're voting on, and you can't hold anyone accountable.
Yeah, so I mean...
But that's why they can't process these fines, and that's why they can't go after these businesses, because they can't even get their own policies done right now.
And one thing you did say is, like, I guess you have success right now. There are businesses that are open now and working with your initiative?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day we get people signing up anonymously, and they get back to work.
And have they had any complaints or stuff come back in?
Not one. We have a 0% complaint rate so far. 0% of the people have gotten any type of fine or even a visit from the government bylaw officer or even any negative customer reviews so far.
So far, yeah, well received, I guess.
100%.
Amazing.
We have absolutely no issues. The only issues we have are people trying to stop us from what we're doing.
And I guess with aspects of people trying to stop you, what sort of conflict or sort of pressure have you received from being pretty outspoken, vocal, like you're down Queen's Park with the mic,
Standard defamation tactics that you see in government type things. Whenever there's someone that doesn't go along with the government agenda that poses a threat, they'll attack you from all sides of the political spectrum. They attack your character. I've had people call my business. I've had people threaten me. I've had people show up at my house. I even had somebody try to make a fake back to work website using my pictures, my images, to create a fake GoFundMe account to try to delegitimize the whole thing. Yeah. So they've gone pretty far.
You have wow. I mean, you're out there really somewhat combating a narrative, right? Like there's
it's not
a large
just
narrative.
a narrative. It's literally a government-enforced destruction of the economy. You have to get that through people's head. This isn't just a consequence of bad decisions. This is an intentional action on the government to try to damage the small business sector because they want chaos. The more people that they can get put out of work, the more people that were once dependent and stable who are now dependent on government, the more power the government receives. If you can turn the middle class, which is the business owners and all the people they employ, into a new class of government dependents, not only have you inverted the power structure, the people are now servants and the government is now their master because they can't survive without their CRB payment, which they extended, by the way. At that point, the government can make you do whatever you want. All this stuff they're talking about with contact tracing, with the vaccines, etc. How much easier is it for them to make those things mandatory if you need to collect a paycheck every month from the government just to feed your family?
So yeah, I guess I hear you saying there is sort of, you say they, and I guess aspect of like people.
Well, I'm talking about government and all the people they work with. People mention George Soros as a non-government person that does things with the government. Well, he has connections directly to the top levels of our government. We have a deputy PM, Chrystia Freeland, who's an author. It's basically the second person in command of our country, appointed, not even elected. And she just wrote George Soros' biography, his official biography. So our deputy PM is literally getting paid directly from George Soros. And if you don't think that means that he has an influence over our government, that's naive to say the least. I'm not saying you, I'm talking to people in general.
Yeah. No,
but it goes one step further. This has to be mentioned because I go back to when I said that we know this is planned and we know this is not accidental. Chrystia Freeland is on the record. She did a CTV interview on June 8th, and she let the cat out of the bag saying that their reopening strategy for Ontario, especially Toronto, is going to take the next 8 months, which would bring us all the way into 2021. Obviously, any business that was shut from March to January is not going to survive. So she is enforcing policies that we know are destroying the small businesses and propping up big businesses to record highs. Walmart, Amazon, they're at record highs.
This is the only place you can go.
Yes, and I told you she's an author. In 2012, right before, around the time where all this stuff was being planned, she wrote a nice book. You know what her book was called? Plutocrats, The Rise of the World's Super Rich and the Fall of Everybody Else. A pretty coincidental and convenient title considering that she's now enforcing the policies that are literally making her book come to reality while she's being paid by George Soros.
So yeah, and when you say they, you're talking about?
When I say they, I'm talking about NGOs, charities, foundations, all the people that the government likes to utilize to help make policy in closed-door meetings that are the reason why these lockdowns and these measures are coordinated and happen worldwide. For these types of things to happen around the world at the same time, it's not an accident. They have to have massive coordination. Social distancing measures, all these guidelines, they come out almost universally and around the world.
Very uniform, yes.
Yes, except for one measure that I'd like to point out. In Canada, we're getting everything harder than everybody else. We have the 6 feet social distance rule here. Where did that rule come from?
Let's see, we have a report going on that right now. But
did you know where it came from?
Please inform us.
We heard it on TV. That's where anybody you ask says, where did you find that? Where did you get that? What agency told you that? Nobody has an answer. They just say, we heard it on TV. You know why? Because even the WHO recommends 1 meter of social distancing on their own website. Why is this significant? All over Europe, they're using this 1 meter social distance. This is huge. Think of a restaurant. Tables are already 2.5 feet apart. If your guidelines tell you you need to put it 3 feet apart instead, that extra 6 inches ain't gonna make or break your restaurant. But over here in Canada, where we have one of the lowest population densities in the entire world, they want these tables have to be 6 feet apart. Now that applies to restaurants, meaning you're gonna lose at least half your capacity. I don't know about you, but how many restaurants do you know can survive with 50% capacity?
Well, very few. I mean, like the business model is really based on full capacity.
Exactly.
You're going to have during the summer months, your patio's full, and that will ride you through your sort of after December and Christmas.
But imagine you're completely shut down for 4 months at least. It's already been 4 months. And then when they allow you to open, first, they only allow your patio, which is about 15% capacity. So now you've already been closed for 4 months, and then for a month you're at 15%. And then the next month you're at 50%. You've had very little economic activity. What do you think is going to happen in the fall when they want to lock everybody down again?
I mean, I guess like to your initiative, like the aspect where you're hearing like another 8 months, like it's just like businesses won't be able to exist, especially the way that it has been structured. So either people take the power into their own hands and do what they want, or do with like sort of following the guidelines, but just open, understanding that they're doing it to feed themselves. And then really, if they wait for the government, it's just going to roll this whole thing out.
Anybody who wants to wait for the government to save them is going to be waiting a long time. The government doesn't care about you. I can prove that. I meet these businesses every week. I met a business just last week. I got one of my emails saying that they joined the network. So I do what I always do. I called them. A woman answered, said she owned a laser clinic. I don't want to give the name or the location, obviously. And asked me when I could come see them. So I told them I was available the following day. I went there to visit them, and I met her and her husband at their clinic. And sure enough, they told me they had already lost their house. They were about a week or 2 away from losing their business. And then at that moment, their 2 little girls and their little dog walked out of the back room. And I saw their entire family. The little girls were completely oblivious to what was going on, thank God. But the parents were at the end of their rope. Sure enough, we did what we always do. We looked at their lease. They had that clause, so they didn't owe any rent, which saved them right away. Then, after walking around with them and looking at their place, we provided them an adaptive business model to allow them to generate revenue. And sure enough, they saved their business, they're stable, and hopefully they're going to get their house back for their kids. But the example there just goes to show how the government does not care. They do not care about you. They do not care about your children. They're not doing this for your health, your safety, or your well-being. They're doing this so they can control you. They're doing this so they can put themselves in a position of power and take your power away. And that's what we're trying to give people back. That's why the network is an anonymous network. The idea here is, once I have 100, 200 businesses in the network, it's the same rule of protesting. If we tried to do a protest with 4 or 5 people in Queen's Park, the cops would be all over us in 2 seconds. We'd be detained, we'd be shut down. But if you have 300, 400, or 500 people there, they're gonna let you protest, because if they try to stop you, they're gonna look like the bad guys. Same rule is gonna apply to these businesses. Once we have 100, 200 businesses within the network, I can give them all an opening date and a go-ahead. Open, full tilt, no guidelines. How could the government possibly stop them? They could go to 3 or 4 businesses a day and give them warnings or try to find them. And the moment they do that, our legal team will be there, the news will be there, hundreds of supporters will be there, and it'll turn into a media spectacle of the government trying to criminalize a single mother who's simply trying to feed her children and provide to her family.
So yeah, you're really bringing in the human aspect to this sort of lockdown, really calling on, I guess, like $100. If you get 100 businesses in, then you already have $10,000, but then you'll have a cash pool for the people who do need the legal thing.
Ideally,
so
we're
really
going to have between $25,000 and $50,000 for the legal fee. Okay. But if a business does get a fine, and we do get on TV, and everybody finds out what's really going on, because they're doing everything they can to keep me off mainstream media. They don't want people to know about this. How many people do you think would donate? In Dallas, that salon that got shut down by the government did a GoFundMe. They got almost $500,000 in less than a week. So I expect the same type of thing to happen with back to work as soon as the public is aware of what's really going on. See, the government is lying constantly. Every headline they tell you is, oh, we're opening, everything's going back to normal. They give you all these misleading headlines.
I think one thing we did start talking about was the fear, and I just want to, I guess, start with like looking into a story with Neil Ferguson in the London Imperial College, and just the original projections of like 2 million dead in the U.S., and that was what shut the U.S. down. It was like really a study that came out.
Not a study. Don't call it a study. Call them what they are: projections, aka models, which are made up by people. They are numbers that people put into a computer to get a predetermined result. So if they say we want to show 2 million people might die from this, they can make that model say that. And that's exactly what they did.
And what they did, I mean, after Neil Ferguson got caught having an affair or sleeping with someone with COVID, giving that family COVID, he had to release the data. And that was kind of interesting, where the data was never released. It was said 2 million dead in their predictions, but they didn't release the data. So I'm really kind of covering that story and how that has led to now, and really that fear that a lot of people said, yes, what we were told, we should lock down. But what we were told has been utter bullshit. And now we want to lead into that with you and the fear and kind of like talking to businesses and like really what's happening about people joining this movement with you.
Let's start from the beginning of the pandemic. Fear is their number one weapon. They used the fear of these made-up models, and they told Canadians there's a high projection, a medium projection, and a low projection. Even the low projection was tens and tens of thousands of dead people. So they scared the hell out of everybody, and we had no data at the time. So we had no actual real evidence to go by, so all we could do is take their word for it. And they told us we need to lock down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. People like me that always question the government, question government's motives, question their authority, intentions, etc., couldn't even question the idea of locking down for 2 weeks because I didn't have any data to go by. But at the same time, I also knew that them saying 2 weeks was just their way to get in. And once they got in, getting your freedoms, getting everything back once you've given them up, as we see now, are a lot harder. So fear has been their main weapon since day one. They used these fear of these models, which turned out to be completely false, not even close to what the actual data showed, to lock everybody down. Then they used the fear on TV to constantly give people the impression this virus is much more dangerous than it really is. Just they're showing all these death stats stacking up, thousands and thousands of deaths. But when
it's like a sports game.
Exactly, they're trying to up the stats to up the fear.
And like even what they're saying is with the number of cases to death, that's disingenuous. Like it's really the infection rate to deaths. One thing with the flu is they add 50 million infections to the yearly study because will get you to that death rate.
Yeah.
So the way we're talking about this sort of aspect with COVID is...
The way they're publishing death rates on TV was completely dishonest and disingenuous. They were taking total positive tested cases versus deaths. It doesn't work like that.
That's not stats.
In order to have a death rate, you need to know how many total cases there are, period. Not just tested cases. You need to know how many people in the entire country.
Extrapolating data.
Exactly. So they're telling people this virus had a 3 to 5% death rate at first. Now we know from the CDC numbers that the virus death rate is basically the same as a severe flu in the normal population, something like a 99.8% survival rate. And you can back it up by looking at the stats. The stats today...
Well, the data now.
Yes, the data is the statistics.
Stats, yes.
Now we have all the deaths, we know how old everybody was, etc. So what do the data tell us? In the age bracket of 0 to 20 in Canada, 0 to 20, not one person has died from COVID. Not one. Meanwhile, they've revamped our schools like prisons and mental institutions for the children.
Canceled summer camps.
Canceled summer camps. Made daycares ridiculous. You can't sing at daycare. You can't have a stuffed animal. All these ridiculous measures to supposedly protect our children, which are the equivalent of psychological torture. If you go to those schools, what they're going to put the kids through is over a decade of psychological trauma. And they're saying that's going to protect our children. No, that's going to destroy our children's development. All for a virus that hasn't even killed one. And they just released data like 3 or 4 days ago. They've been calling children AKA super spreaders of the virus since day one as one of their justifications for keeping them locked down. Now they just released the data. Just like not one children has died from COVID up to a young adult age of 20, they confirmed that not one older person has actually been infected by a child.
Actually, I read an article today from the Canadian Press saying that really they thought they were like mass spreaders like the flu.
Exactly.
But actually, no.
It's the complete opposite.
Opposite.
Because they have a healthy immune system and COVID doesn't affect them. COVID in Canada cannot even be classified as lethal to children because it hasn't even killed one. Not even a child with a compromised immune system, not even a child that already had like terminal leukemia has died of COVID.
I just want to make a point, like, people are dying and it is affecting people, and just not to be insensitive to this, but to really understand that the level of draconian measures to protect us from something that the predictions said yes. These predictions with no data, and even now with Ford, he's making predictions. I cannot find the data. I'm trying to find the data.
He won't give you the data.
But like, this is the main thing, that we're really putting our trust in these people. But when they aren't really doing the due diligence to go and fact check from their own, what's the data? Let's share it if it is that. And Neil Ferguson, when he released the data, he modified the data from the Imperial College. He modified it, put it on GitHub, which is an open source thing, and they just destroyed it. They said, this is the worst thing ever. This is not science.
Well, I'm going to give everybody the actual data for Canada, like I just started with the 0 to 20s. 95% of our dead were 60 plus. 95%. That means from the age bracket of 0 to 59, we have around 350 people that have died in the entire country of COVID. To lock down a country for that is absolutely ludicrous, and there is no reason for that. Then we had the whole idea of flatten the curve. You heard them say flatten the curve about 1 million times a day for the first 2 months of this crisis. In Ontario alone, we have just under 500 hospitals. By May 31st, we only had 750 COVID patients in those hospitals. That was 1.5 patients per hospital. The curve has been flattened for months. They stopped releasing the hospital data as of June 8th on the Ontario Hospital Association website because hospital data had shown that they had dropped below 500 patients for the 500 hospitals. And it's so ridiculous and so embarrassing that they just took the data off the internet and even took all the updates that had started from January off the internet. So they're telling us that we needed to flatten the curve, and we have less than one person per hospital right now for COVID. Now they switch the narrative to infections, and they keep telling us that we're getting 200 to 300 new infections every week. Well, that's because they started testing. They were testing 5,000 to 6,000 people a week before. Now they're testing 20,000 people a week. And we know that many of those tests show up as false positives. CTV News released an article just yesterday or the day before saying that up to 50% of COVID cases are false positives. There are now lawsuits from different long-term care homes from the people that had died and that said they had COVID, and they're suing for millions and millions of dollars because we know they have false positives. So now they're using this narrative of 200 to 300 infections as justification to lock us down. The reality is they can test 20,000 people anywhere in the world, any day of the week for COVID, and you'll always show at least 200 to 300 infections because you have false positives in there. So it's a scam. There's no way that they can show justification. And to prove this, we spoke outside of Parliament. We got the support of Randy Hillier with my political organization, Fearless Ontario, which we started specifically to gain public support from sitting MPs so we could put political pressure on the current government. Randy voted against the lockdown. He came out and he spoke in support of us at Queen's Park. He went back in and he tabled an amendment called a Justification Transparency Amendment. This amendment was supposed to hold the government accountable and force them to release the name of their experts and all the data that they were using to justify our lockdown. Guess what the government did? They held a secret ballot vote to vote on that amendment, meaning everyone there just wrote yay or nay on a piece of paper randomly, threw it in a little box, and they counted the yay or nays. Secretly. So they voted against the accountability amendment, and they voted in a way so you wouldn't know who voted against the amendment.
This is when
the ultimate
Parliament
in
was
unaccountability.
meant to be in session, but they chose
Yes,
to
and this
vote.
is after they suspended Parliament. So first they suspend Parliament so they can be mini dictatorship. Then, when they're faced with an amendment that would actually force them to tell the public the truth, they use a secret voting method to vote against it in a way so you don't know which of them voted against it.
I think this is an important point to really clarify is like, yeah, right now, what is happening, what Randy was talking about was really, it's a secret council that they talk about whatever and pass laws how they want.
Of course.
In a sense, like a dictatorship or a king or
With
wherever.
no justification. Because when we asked them...
But there is no transparency allowed. And that was what Randy was trying to pass, was like, hey, let's like at least have some transparency. And like really what democracy and I are sort of like holding people accountable, because there's no actually accountability too.
No.
From whatever they pass, whatever happens,
Nothing happens.
they are fully
every
against
2 weeks,
legal repercussions.
Every 2 weeks, they have to show justification for extending the emergency measures. And every 2 weeks, we say, what's the data? And they say, we're not going to show it to you. And then we say, well, who are the experts giving us the data? And they say, well, we can't tell you for their privacy. So they won't tell you who's giving them the info. They won't tell you what the info is, but they can tell you that they're sure they need to keep locking you down. So that brings us to so that's the fear that they use to keep everybody in their homes. Then they use the propaganda to tell you if you go outside, you're irresponsible. So they use more fear of what other people will do to you if you speak out, if you don't follow the rules, fear of society. Everything with them is fear, because fear makes people compliant. Fear makes people listen to what you tell them. So that's what they're using the fear for. Their next tactic is division. They've tried to divide society into smaller and smaller factions, because that way they can isolate us and subjugate us. They know if we all stand together and we all stood up and said, no, we're not going to stay locked down, we're not going to stay in our homes, and we all come out, there's nothing they can do. They know if we all stand together and say we're opening our businesses tomorrow, there's nothing they can do. They know if we say we're not going to wear a bloody mask or put our kids into some prison school, there's nothing they can do. So what do? First, they use fear to make everybody afraid, and make everybody afraid of the government, make everybody afraid of each other, literally, stay 6 feet away from me or else. And then they use division.
Fear of their breath?
Yeah, fear of government reprisals if you try to open your business. Fear of the virus with holy death rates.
One
fear of
thing
the
too,
public if you speak out against it. What are your friends going to say? They're going to ostracize you. They might even try to fire you.
But the fear too is where at the beginning it was like, oh, I'm going to kill your grandparents.
Yeah.
Like if I have it,
Yeah.
I'm asymptomatic or whatever, my immune system can handle it and I can live. And then me, by operating to that level, I have to be detained just in case I...
Which is ridiculous.
I mean, and only to the point that if it was as deadly as it was predicted.
Yes,
right?
I
If
agree.
it was like, whoa, literally like that would happen, and it would be like that happening, I would have killed
If young,
50
healthy people were
grandparents.
dropping dead in the streets,
Or even-
then I can
yeah.
understand this. When 95% of
not
the
there.
people were 60 plus, and 80% of those people that died were in long-term care homes.
And also had
Then it's a
other,
different
like
story.
when Italy, when it came out, where it was like 97% had like 1 to 4 underlying conditions, other conditions, and really that if the reporting of like death, COVID, boom, and then like we've really lost the journalist, our sort of medical practice of like reporting.
Before I get back to the division, I'll make a quick
But like,
point
let's
on
go,
that.
yeah, I mean,
Because what you said about the COVID reporting is actually very important and people should know. When somebody dies of something, say I die of heart attack, or I die of a gunshot wound, or I died of cancer, my death certificate will say died from. Now, if I had an underlying condition, like if I had the flu and I died of a heart attack, they'd say died from heart attack with flu. But my death on my death certificate will be recorded as the from cause, the direct cause of death, which would be heart attack. With COVID, in North America, and especially in the United States, they changed the reporting guidelines, so anything that has with COVID, not from COVID, will be listed as death from COVID. So in the United States, their death rate is so much higher than everywhere else in the world, because if you die of a heart attack, if you die of stroke, if you die of cancer, they will say that you also had COVID as an underlying condition, and then they will list the death as caused COVID. Why? They get paid for everybody that dies from COVID.
this is
Now,
a huge other topic that
but I just wanted to touch on that,
yeah,
but now
yeah.
we're going to go back to the division because that's the most important thing.
I mean, and in that division too, I mean, I remember when we were covering when the protests, they were going to Not Another Black Lives, the original one. They were going to go to Queen's Park, but I believe they talked about just like an anti-Semite or like a white fascist group.
That's ridiculous. Well, yeah, from day one, this is also good to point out. From day one, we've been characterized our protests for anti-lockdown, restoring people's rights, getting people back to work, and getting rid of social distancing policies. We've been characterized by Doug Ford as yahoos. We've been characterized by nothing from the mainstream media except racists, white supremacists, far right, fringe. In reality, our protest is Canada on a plate. We're all races, all ethnicities, all age groups from children up to seniors. There's concerned parents, there's business owners, and there's just Canadians that are concerned about what's going on. So that characterization was completely false. But we were demonized as irresponsible, spreading the virus, etc. First of all, we've been there 8 weeks, no one's gotten sick. Black Lives Matter wanted to do an anti-racism protest, and they're aligned with the government. Not only was it encouraged and covered by the mainstream
media.
But
select people within that. Let's just not.
Yes, no. I'm talking about at the high levels, not the street level. Black Lives Matter has some amazing people, amazing leaders, amazing organizers. We're talking about at the highest level, the people who created and
I mean, this
control.
again, the
Antifa
sort of stuff, and there was hidden cameras and stuff that came out with them training. But again, let's try and stay on point.
The point is, we were characterized as irresponsible for having up to 1,000 people protesting anti-lockdown. Meanwhile, Trudeau actually marched with these people, endorsed these people, thousands and thousands of people, and they weren't irresponsible. They were encouraged. And in fact, they actually pushed it as something that's positive. So the hypocrisy there is ridiculous. And not to mention, after that, we had Trinity Bellwoods that week, we had that protest, and we had our protest. And that week we had only tested 6,000 people. 2 weeks later, we tested 20,000 people after all those mass gatherings. And even though we tested 3 times as many people and we had those mass gatherings, we still had a lower infection rate. So that's a good point to make. So now the division. The government's tool to get everybody compliant is fear. Now the government's tool to prevent everybody from fighting back is division. Because together, we're strong. Divided, we're not. So how did the government divide everybody? First, they divided everybody between the people who believe the virus is dangerous and the people who know better. Then they divided everybody by the people who are collecting CRB payments versus the people who are business owners and still working. So now we have already 4 different factions. Then, as we saw in the States, the next obvious division is the racial one. They have the riots going on over there. They have literally that autonomous area set up in Seattle, which is really crazy. I don't even want to talk about it. But they did everything in their power to try to foment race riots here. They had Antifa posting stuff online. They had black bloc rumors of people coming from Quebec to cause riots. Everything they could do to foment this division between the races. And then we had Black Lives Matter show up, was told to come to our protest at Queen's Park. Who told them? I don't know. It made no sense. They had their own protest, but they decided to come to Queen's Park.
You're talking about the Saturday.
No, that was
the first
this
one.
was the first time when Black Lives Matter actually was coming there.
I think they're going
a small contingent of their group came, and you could tell it was led by Antifa because Antifa and Black Lives Matter look quite different, let's just say. And they were there waiting, and then all of a sudden, the leaders of the street movement of Black Lives Matter had decided this is a Justice for Regis thing. Why are we going to Queen's Park? Let's just go to the police station, which made perfect sense. So they didn't end up coming to Queen's Park. Antifa people posted on the Justice for Regis Facebook page that the reason they didn't go to Queen's Park was because of white supremacy and racism. I went onto their social media and I said, that's absolutely ridiculous, it's defamatory, and I want you to take it down immediately, which they did because they knew they couldn't get away with it. CTV News used that quote even after I had them take it down in their article to characterize us as racist. So the division is crazy. If we ever get mentioned in the news, it's as racist or white supremacist. So then the past week that just happened, we were doing our protest, and we saw another group show up, and it was a big group. They had over 1,000 people. My communications director, Kelly, said, "Which group is that?" I said, "I have no idea. I don't think it's Black Lives Matter because they weren't scheduled to come here." She's like, "You should go find out." So I walked over by myself, and there's literally about 1,000 people, and they're all kneeling, with a hand in the air. I didn't know why they were kneeling, so I just went over and waited for them to stop. I walked over to the one that looked like he was in charge, and I said, "Who are you guys?" They said, "We're Remember the 400, a non-profit group." I said, "Are you guys affiliated with BLM?" I said, "Not at all. We have a lot of conflicting views with them. They're anti-police, we're pro-police. Instead of saying Black Lives Matter, these guys were chanting justice for all. Instead of saying, screw the police or F the police, they were chanting praise 14th Division, who were monitoring our protests and helping us." So I liked their message. They had a positive message. They're a grassroots organization. They had their own GoFundMe campaign with only like $800 or $900 in it. So I knew they weren't affiliated with Black Lives Matter, who has more funding than they can know what to do with. So I told them, we have a platform, I have a mic, I have an entire group of people that's ready to hear what you guys have to say and accept you. And because everybody's been saying that we're this bad group of people, we're racist, we're this and that, and I want everybody to know that we're about ending lockdown for everybody, putting people back to work, and getting everybody's rights back for all of Canada. He said, "I like what you're saying." So they came over, our groups ended up coming together, they did their rally, we heard their speakers, we sang some songs. They ended their rally by giving me the mic and I did a message. Wow, the storm that caused the next day online. I went from being this, for the last 2 months, I have vlog posts, all these things online characterizing me as far-right, anti-white racist, anti-supremacist, all this bad stuff. And then, within 24 hours, because I didn't go along with the narrative of racial tensions and causing violence between the races, instead I tried to unite everybody, all of a sudden I was a far-left George Soros paid operative. So I'm a supervillain of the right and left at the exact same time, apparently. Or I'm just somebody that won't push the government agenda, so they're attacking me from all angles. Because division is their weapon. The next division they're trying to do now, what are we hearing? Defund the police. They're trying to turn now the people against their own police. If you defund the police, who's going to replace them? We've seen this type of thing before in a place called Germany, when the police got replaced
Stalin,
with brown shirts.
Very important things. And I guess like kind of just to bring back into what you just said, around also you coming in today, it was really so people can actually get your message. Like
That's
we
right.
will, this full unedited interview will be around so people can actually look at you and judge you for who you are.
That's right.
Rather than trying to place you in something that they know. Let's get them to know Chris Sky, why he came out, and really, I guess like the one thing I want to kind of end with is going forward and where you're kind of moving. I know Saturday, every Saturday you're down there, but this Saturday is more of a just really kind of building it more from a festival or more.
That's what we want.
Really a celebration of life.
That's what it's called. It's not a protest. We call it a celebration of life, and it's a festival for all of people of Canada. We have literally children up to seniors. We have games. We have drinks. We're going to have food. We're going to have music. It's a party. Masks are discouraged. Social distancing is not required. Everybody just comes out, has a good time, goes to a positive message. Our entire thing is about ending this lockdown, getting people back to work, restoring our rights, and getting everything back to normal. This idea of their new normal is what we're 100% opposed to. Going forward, we have a lot that's going on. Back to Work's going to keep going and expanding. We actually got mentioned on CTV News, finally, from a girl who mentioned us, so that was really good.
Oh, I saw that on your website.
Yeah. Yes, so that was actually big, because as soon as people see something on TV, now it's real. Our next campaign to raise awareness is going to target mothers, because everybody knows moms love their children, and everybody knows our children are the future and they need to be protected. So I came up with a campaign. It's going to be launching really soon. It's called
Probably going to launch right now.
MAD, Mothers Against Distancing. And it's going to be a website that's going to have a whole conglomerate of different doctors and other healthcare professionals showing us all the ways that social distancing is going to be damaging to our children. We're going to combine this. I'm making a video right now. We have a mother who's going to be starring in it. She's a wonderful, gorgeous, intelligent, vibrant young lady. She has a son and a daughter, and she has the benefit of her husband being a well-known doctor. So she's got this credibility. So we're going to be making a video of her interviewing very relevant healthcare professionals and getting all of their professional opinions put into one viral video that we're going to be promoting all over social media, that we hope to make not just go around Canada and the US, but worldwide. We want to reach hundreds of millions.
That's beautiful, because like what we don't hear is our doctors. We don't hear, and what's interesting is like we don't hear naturopath doctors. Traditional Chinese medicine have been dealing with sort of pandemics and this sort of aspect for thousands of years. This allopathic system is 100 years, a little over 100 years old. So we're really putting a lot of credence and reliance on something very new and really shutting the door down on really any other discussion.
Look at the censorship on YouTube and other social media. Basically, unless the WHO says it, it gets taken off. And the WHO has so much conflicting information that they've given us and been wrong about so many things. So the fact that they're only allowing sources like that goes to show you that it's not about getting people the best information. It's not about getting people the truth. It's about controlling the narrative and telling people what you need to tell them so you can control them. So moving forward, we're going to be expanding our Celebration of Life Festival. Every week we get new perks because the cops are 100% against.
Yeah, I hear that because it's the Queen's Park, the peace officers who are responsible for the Speaker of the House. So they're completely different from Ontario and Toronto.
Yes, and they're 100% on our side. In fact, they got over 100 letters of appreciation from the general public for how they were handling our protests and how they were supporting us and not trying to like stop us from doing what we were doing. And they responded to my communications director, Ms. Kellyanne Wolf at Fearless, and said that they support us fully because week after week they can't help but listen to our message and they can't help but resonate with them. People have to understand police are part of our community just like everybody else. So this idea that we need to defund them or divide between us and the police is ridiculous. Their children go to the same schools as your children. They shop at the same stores as you shop that are owned by the same friends as yours that are getting shut down. They're under the same travel restrictions. They're losing their rights just like everybody else. They're literally just trying to keep their jobs, but they're not really enforcing policies that the government, they're not really enforcing the policies that they want to enforce. They're just doing what they're told, which is okay to a point. At this point, they haven't crossed that line yet. And I hope it doesn't get to that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was able to interview our police chief and ask him that too, where like when would the police push back?
Thank you. That's
when,
it's a touchy subject, so I didn't know how to broach it.
What an aspect, yeah. When will they cross something where the police have to be like, no, that is like really putting the politicians in their place? Because really, right now they're putting the people in their place. Which yes, but politicians are people too.
And unfortunately, that's something that I couldn't even speculate on.
So just to wrap this up, just quickly, Chris, to let people know how they can get involved with you. You have many different initiatives going on. Just maybe want to wrap them off, where they can come on Saturday and on that aspect. And yeah.
I'll tell you everything we got going on. So every Saturday, we're at Queen's Park starting at 12 o'clock for our Celebration of Life Festival with special guest speakers, performers, and other things going on. This Sunday, we're actually having a special event as well. We're doing a walk to feed the homeless that starts at Kensington Market at 12 p.m. It was inspired by a friend of mine named Matthew McMillan, whose mother took her own life 3 days after his birthday because he was actually in jail at the time. So it would be her birthday on June 21st, and he came up with this idea to do something nice that he thinks his mother would have liked. So when he told me about it, I just got involved to help make it happen. So I don't want any of the credit for it. It's all from Matthew. He doesn't want any of the credit. He's probably upset that I even mentioned his name, but too bad. Too bad for him. The other things, to get in touch with me, my name is Chris Sky. You can find me on Facebook under Chris Sky. You'll see this. You can't miss me. My Facebook group is #BackToWork. My website is www.backtowwork.bz. There's a GoFundMe campaign on there that's available to any private citizen. For businesses who want to join, there's a joining section there, or you can just contact me via that. I'm also one of the organizers and creators of fearlessontario.ca, and you can find us on Facebook at fearlessontario.ca/Facebook or on Instagram at fearlessontario. Other than that, we're going to be informing people. I'm helping businesses every day. In fact, I'm going to meet 2 businesses today as soon as I finish this interview. So we're literally getting people back to work as promised. And everybody we get back to work is job saved, family saved. I just want to end with these very important stats that everybody needs to know. Small business represents 97% of all the businesses in Canada. At the start of the year, we had 1.15 million small businesses. By June 1st, over 225,000 of those businesses and the jobs they support are gone for good. That's millions of people out of work. That's families out of work. Our small businesses represent 70% of all the jobs in Canada. If we lose our small businesses, the GDP reduction will be so significant that our standard of living will drop to points we've never thought possible. Our taxes will be at record highs. We already have a record deficit. So this is the perfect storm we're left with. We have a huge reduction of GDP of at least 10% this year. We have a huge deficit that's approaching 350 or 400 billion dollars. We have a massive unemployment crisis unlike the likes of we've never seen before, and a massive destruction of the small business industry across the scale, and they're not set to be replaced with anything. So every single business we save is a piece of Canada we save. Every business we lose is a piece of Canada we lost. It's up to the entire community to come together, essential businesses supporting and private citizens alike, because we need to save Canada, we need to save our economy, and we need to stop this new normal and get back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Chris. I'm Scott Snigens from Internet News, and we look forward to hearing more about your endeavors.
Thank you so much, man. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure. Ciao.